All right. Hi, guys. Okay, so we're going to try this out. I'm going to go ahead and video all the notes that I've taken, so hopefully this can be helpful as you're studying for the test. This one is going to be over the integumentary system, so I'll just go ahead and start off. Integumentary system, of course, is about the skin, your nails, your hair, your sweat glands, and of course your sebaceous glands. So it's all of those structures integrated together, and we also call it the cutaneous membrane. So just remember that's one of the 4 types of membranes. So the skin is called the cutaneous membrane as well, and it's made up of all of the tissue types, right? So we're going to find connective tissue, we're going to find epithelial tissue, we're going to find blood vessels, and we're going to find nervous tissue, lots and lots of nervous tissue in there to go ahead and help us sense the things around us. So if you remember from last year, the functions of the integumentary system include protection. Actually, that's one of the biggest things that we think about with the integumentary system. It's also including sensation, excretion of waste, not very much, but it is part of it. And it also stores blood, fascinatingly enough. It helps to regulate our temperature through vasodilation and also vasoconstriction. So of course, when we get too hot, our blood cells are going to go ahead and vasodilate. They're going to get bigger, and so that blood is going to come to our cheeks and our skin and actually help us cool off. And then that vasoconstriction is going to constrict the blood vessels so that we're maintaining more heat and we're not losing it through our blood vessels. Of course, another big piece is making vitamin D. So of course, when we go out into the sun, we are able to take those rays and convert them into vitamin D for our body, which is super important, especially now we're getting into November and we're going to start feeling kind of those blues from not getting enough sun. And it's also an indication of poor health. So if your skin color starts to change, let's say you get jaundice and you start to look yellow, that could be an indication that your liver is failing. And so the skin can actually give us a pretty good idea of someone's health. Along with that, a huge piece is preventing water loss. So remember that it covers our entire body and it helps to maintain the amount of water that we have inside of us. And so one of the big fears of like getting burned, especially like 2nd and 3rd degree burns, if they are over a large portion of the body, is that then we're actually going to have an increased loss of water. And so dehydration is a really big concern there when someone comes in as a burn victim into the hospital. Okay, so those are some of the functions. The next part is really more about the different structures that we find in the epidermis, dermis, and the hypodermis, or the subcutaneous membrane. So I'm going to draw some things here. I always think that it kind of looks like a cake, but maybe that's just because the way that I draw it. But there are 3 layers. And so, like I said before, kind of like a cake monster there, we've got our epidermis, our dermis, and our hypodermis, or our subcutaneous layer. So there's that as I erase the epidermis there. So a couple things that I want you to note here on this picture is that the epidermis is going to go ahead and have 5 layers or strata or stratum. And so we go ahead, I always remember this by B.S. Grandma-Lucy. So I think of the game B.S. Grandma-Lucy. And so it's going to be B.S.G.L.C. So that B is going to stand for the basal layer, and that's the base. The S stands for spinosum. This is where we're going to go ahead and find our spiny cells and also our lymphatic system cells. So we've got a lot of immune cells there that are going to help protect the body from any foreign invaders. The next one is the granulosum. You're going to start to find granules of keratin in there. So remember that the epidermis is filled with these cells called keratinocytes, and they're responsible for creating the protein keratin, which is also responsible for helping our skin to be tough and protective on the outside. So you'll just want to remember this part right here, we consider keratinized stratified squamous for our epithelial cells. Our next one there is going to be the lucidum. We're going to find that within thick skin. So thick skin actually only has 5, it has 5 layers, and the rest of our skin has 4 layers. So lucidum is going to be found within the skin of the palms and the soles of the feet, along with a lack of sebaceous glands as well as hair follicles, for the most part. The last one is going to be our corneum. That one's going to have lots of dead, flattened cells that are filled to the brim with keratin. And so when you scratch your skin, you're going to see, little dead flakes come off, and that's actually just dead skin cells. Kind of gross because that's what makes up the dust around us. All right. We're going to go ahead and move down into our dermis. You'll notice our little cake bumps there are called dermal papillae. And the whole purpose of this is so that the dermis can actually create more surface area between the epidermis and the dermis. And that's important because we find capillary beds in each of these dermal papillae that are important for bringing nutrients and oxygen to the epithelial cells up above here in the epidermis. Included in that, of course, we're going to go ahead and drawing away carbon dioxide and waste and those kind of things that the cells are producing here on the basal and spinosum layer. Also, you're going to find that there are two sections here. So maybe I'll go ahead and put a couple of things here, right? We're going to find that this is going to be our papillary layer. Now, of course, my pen decided to die. And this is going to be our reticular layer. Okay, whoop, there you go, guys, sorry. Okay, papillary and reticular layer. A couple of things with the papillary layer, you're going to notice, of course, that it's going to have those projections to increase the surface area between the epithelial cells and the cells of the dermis, along with it being made up of areolar connective tissue. The reticular layer is going to be irregular dense connective tissue, so CT just stands for connective tissue. The purpose of that dense irregular connective tissue is that we find there's lots of large bundles of collagen fibers, and they're not going to be straight across and all in one really big bundle, that you're going to find them kind of crisscrossing across the dermal layer, along with there being elastic and reticular fibers that we find in connective tissue. When those go ahead and bundle together in specific directions, we call those cleavage lines, and they cover our entire body in certain directions. There's a really cool picture in the text along with in the PowerPoint of basically looking like someone who's been tattooed with lines over their entire body. And this is important because if you are a surgeon and you go ahead and you cut perpendicular to those lines, it's actually going to cause the wound to gape, versus if you cut parallel with the lines, the healing process is going to be a lot faster, and you're going to find scars aren't going to be as prevalent in parallel line cuts with the cleavage, just because it's not gaping, it's not causing it to pull apart. So the whole point of those cleavage lines is to help resist stress in different areas. So it depends, of course, fingers and arms and legs are going to have different lines depending on the amount of stress that's pulling against them. So you can also hear them called tension lines. I'm going to stop right there for right now, but that gets us through the epidermis and the dermis for right now, and then we'll talk about the hypodermis and some of the special structures in the next video.